Welcome to TubRepairStore.com. Here we're going to be installing a large floor crack repair kit. Okay, this repair kit actually added a can of glass putty. So in the standard floor crack repair kit, you only get one can of glass putty. In this repair, we added a can of glass putty, which you can do on our website as you're approaching checkout. So um, this crack was a very long crack. It was roughly 12 inches long, which is a bit longer than we normally recommend. Now watch here as I'm going through drilling these holes. I'm spacing them out fairly evenly, and some of them I'm going all the way down to the subfloor, and then these holes that I'm here drilling at the end, I'm just going shallow there. I'm just going right through the shower floor, and I'm stopping at the support board. So that's what you want to feel for whenever you're drilling your holes, is you'll feel the shower floor, you'll go through that, you'll feel a different layer of resistance, which is a support board that's generally fiberglass to the bottom of the tub. And then you'll go through that, and then you'll feel another gap. And that's generally a bigger gap, and that's going to go down to the subfloor. So first I go through here, most of my foam is going to go in the deep layer gap. That's generally the wider gap. That's going to be 1 to 3 inches wide. And then you have the shallow layer gap, which is going to be maybe an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch wide. So when you're pumping your foam, you're really not going to feel a lot of back pressure. You just want to do, short bursts down in the deep layer. That foam is going to come out pretty quick. And then in the shallow layer, that's where you're actually going to see the foam come snaking out. That's what you want to see in the shallow layer. You're not going to see that in the deep layer. Give that at least 2 hours. If you do end up pumping a lot of foam, like maybe you use a full can or 2 cans, you may have to give it longer time. You just don't want it to be gooey in the center of that excess foam. You don't want it to be gooey when you pop that off of there. So here I've just prepped the surface. I've sanded down the area with my 80 grit sandpaper. I've sanded it smooth. You want to sand down any kind of traction control grooves that you have on the floor there. I went ahead and put a piece of mesh tape over the crack. That's not something you have to do, but you can do, and you'll have the mesh tape in your kit. So this is the first can of glass putty. We give you an 8-ounce can of glass putty, which will normally work up to about a 9-inch crack, is about as large of a crack as you want to do on that. Now here, uh, you'll notice in your kit, your hardener is probably going to be blue. We were just testing the red hardener. Um, it didn't color the putty as much as we wanted, so we just send out the blue. That's what we have, but either color will work. So here I'm just adding my first layer. I'm really just trying to seal that damage up and set the foundation, and then I'm going to go on top of it. So when you're adding multiple layers, you only need to let that first layer set up for about 10 minutes or so until it's kind of firm to the touch. It's not sticky or gooey. It's not transferring to your glove. And then you're ready to go ahead and apply the second layer on top of that. You do not have to sand it in between layers if you're going to build up your layers like this. So here we're using the rest of that first can, and that's gonna go a long way. So we're just building it up for strength here. Now, one thing you can do whenever you're doing this is go ahead and feather those edges out. And then what I did was I gave it 30 minutes to cure, and then I sanded around the edges and over the top. And here is after I sanded. This is where you want to test the strength of it. So here I am sanding. This is an 80 grit sandpaper. We like to hook the vacuum to the orbital sander. That cuts down on your dust a lot. So we highly recommend that. Now I always go around the edges, feather out the edges first, then go over the top. This glass putty does not have to be perfectly smooth. We are going to go back over it with finish putty, so if you have little dimples in it or things like that, that's no problem. Really, the main thing you're trying to do here is trying to get the edges nice and feathered down to where you can't feel a lip around the edges, and then basically smoothing out the top, but it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, so don't stress over that. Um, we're going to apply finish putty to really smooth this out. So always clean up your repair area after you get done sanding in between steps, and you just wipe everything with acetone. Now, be aware, we do include a trigger sprayer for the acetone in your coating box, so definitely put that on your acetone bottle. Now here I'm just going to apply my finish putty. With the finish putty, I use the same hardener that I used previously, so the blue hardener will work just fine. That's what we give you. And the ratio on the hardener, and this is both for finish putty and glass putty, is going to be 1 part hardener to 50 parts putty. Now, don't get hung up on that ratio. That is the minimum ratio. You can be over that. In fact, we give you basically 1 part hardener to 12 parts resin. So you have about 4 times as much hardener as you actually need. So you can kind of use it in proportion, but you should have some hardener left over. That's not going to be a problem. You're going to give this 15 minutes to set up, and then you're ready to sand it with the 120 grit sandpaper. Now the goal here is to make it very smooth. So I always start by going around the edges and feathering those edges, and then I go over the top, and you really do want it to be very smooth here. Any dimples or imperfections, any lips around the edges, you're going to be able to see those when you spray it. So you do want it to be very smooth. Now one thing you can do, is when these products are setting up, you could actually mix in your color and make your coating. So that is a lot of times that's the order that will go in. So you could do this part while the glass putty is setting up during that 30-minute window that you have there, or you can take a break and save this for the end. Either way is fine. Now, when you're mixing your color, we give you 4 colors. We give you gloss white, gold white, gray white, and almond. So I always recommend test 1 drop of each color and figure out which color is the closest to your tub color. Okay, so in this instance, almond was very close to my tub color, so I am just gonna use that as my base. Now this is a larger repair, so on a repair this size, you're gonna want to mix about 2 ounces of paint resin. That's going to really go a long way. That'll be more than enough to cover this large of a repair, but this is a very large repair, so 2 ounces of paint resin is going to be how much you want. Now here you'll see I just add a little color, so maybe I'm lightening it up, and so I'm adding a little bit of gloss white, and I'm just going to stir that up, and then I'm going to test my swatch. Now when you're testing your swatch, put a drop on the surface and swirl it around until that swatch gets a little sticky. And then you're going to blow dry it and it's going to darken just a little. That's that's the color that you want to determine if that matches or not. So it will be dry, it'll darken a little bit as it dries, and then when it's done, you can just clean up the swatches with acetone. This is a standard fiberglass tub, so acetone doesn't have any effect on it, which is nice. Now here, when you're measuring your ratios, always use the glass jar to measure ratios. Do not use the mixing cups, okay? So here I'm using the ounces on the glass jar, and I'm going to go up to 2 ounces of paint resin, okay? Now our minimum ratio calls for 4 parts resin, 1 part catalyst, and 2 parts reducer. So in this instance, it's 2 ounces of resin. I'm using a ½ ounce of catalyst and 1 ounce of reducer. Now you can be over on the catalyst and reducer. So if I used 3/4 of an ounce of catalyst and maybe an ounce and a quarter of reducer, that's going to be no problem. Just be sure to stir it up very well. Get that resin off the floor, off the walls. You really just want to be sure to get this stirred up very well. Now this pre-val, there are a couple of things about this pre-val. We include a troubleshooting card in your kit, so watch that. One thing that is causing people a lot of problems is there is a little pinhole down on the underside of that canister, that sprayer. Do not shake that glass jar and get product up on the bottom side of that plastic base. that will clog that hole and it will malfunction. It won't spray correctly. So don't shake that pre-valve up, okay? Now here I'm just wiping on my wipe-on primer before I get ready to spray it. This just uh, increases the adhesion of the coating. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to let that dry for about 20 or 30 seconds before we actually spray. Now on the first coat, we're just going to go through and we're just going to fog it on. We're not trying to color the whole thing at once. We're just going to do the first coat, which is a tack coat, and then we're going to dry it for about a minute, minute and a half in between coats. Now here we've cut out the blow drying, so just remember, in between coats, just do one even coat and then blow dry it for about a minute and a half. And then go back over, do a second coat. Now, if your sprayer malfunctions, watch our troubleshooting video. You're going to do about 4 or 5 coats until it's fully coated. So that was only 2 coats, but we actually do about 4 coats or so on this repair. So that's the FloorTrack repair kit. It comes with everything you need except for the pieces of equipment that we list on our website.